Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Conversation in the Spirit. And we are blessed this day to have with us no less than the Vatican's Secretary for Relations with States, Archbishop Paul Gallagher. Archbishop Gallagher, good morning.
Good morning. It's good to be here and have this opportunity to be in the Philippines again.
This 2024 is a very special year, as, please correct me if the information is incorrect, but I understand that you joined the diplomatic service of the Holy See in 1984.
That's correct.
So that would make it your 40th
40th year.
40th
yes.
anniversary. And then you were appointed nuncio for the first time in 2004.
That's right.
And so that would make 2024 your 20th
20th year.
anniversary. And you were appointed Secretary for Relations for States in 2014.
That's right.
And that would make this year your 10th year anniversary.
Yeah.
So it's a triple celebration.
Yes.
And happy anniversary. I hope you are somehow able to celebrate it in the Philippines.
Well, yes, it's been a very joyful experience so far, seeing one or two old friends and coming to this house where I lived for over 4 years.
Yes, I noticed that also, that you had been stationed here in the Philippines for a while. What years were this, Archbishop?
I came in 1991 and I left just after World Youth Day in 95. So it was the early part. So World Youth Day, John Paul II was here in January, and I think I left in the first days of February.
So at the time, Archbishop, you were here not as nuncio.
No, I was the counselor of the nunciature. That's the sort of number 2.
You said for 4 whole years.
Yeah.
So can you speak a little bit of Filipino?
No, not really. I must confess. Tagalog is something I didn't give much attention to, I'm afraid.
But the visit of Pope John Paul II, Saint Pope John Paul II, who is incidentally the patron saint of Dominus Est, for that World Youth Day was so. We had millions of people in Luneta, so you played a great part in the organization of that visit.
Yes, it was a large part of my life for about a year and a half. I was on the committee of organizing the Pope's visit and World Youth Day, together with Cardinal Sin and many other people. Yeah.
So you must have great memories with Cardinal Sin?
Oh yes, great and amusing memories as well.
Well, I mean, it's July. Amusing?
Oh, yes, he was a funny guy in many ways. Well, he was very good at organizing big parties at Villa San Miguel and those things, and he would come and visit the nunciature, and it was always very, very amusing. I remember the books that that he published in those years about his life and his travels, which had amusing titles like the Book of Sin and
Yes.
Travels with Sin and things like this. So he liked making play of his name.
And what are your memories of Pope John Paul II?
Well, it was a very interesting experience too. Obviously, I knew a little bit about the Pope, obviously, seen him a number of times in audiences, but to actually live in the house with him, that was the interesting thing. You seeing him praying, and considering he was obviously so busy and so much to do and so many people to see, he spent an extraordinary amount of time in the chapel praying, and that was very impressive.
Wow.
And he was quiet. He wasn't as extrovert as people, I think, sometimes think. He was a quiet, prayerful man who I think gave you a great example about the importance of prayer in the life of a Christian, in the life of a priest and a bishop.
It was, so you became a nuncio for the first time in 2004. So at this time, was it still Pope John Paul II?
Yes, it was.
Oh, okay. So, so it was Pope John Paul II who made you nuncio.
It was.
Saint Pope John Paul II.
Yes.
Oh.
And he was, when I was ordained bishop by Cardinal Sodano, not by then the Pope was too weak really to perform big ceremonies in St. Peter's. So Cardinal Sedani used to do the Episcopal ordination, so he ordained me.
And I noticed that you have been nuncio in different continents around the world. So the first one was Burundi.
Burundi.
And for those who are not familiar with geography, this is in East Africa?
East Africa, yes.
Yes. And what was that experience like, Archbishop?
Well, it was a wonderful experience to begin as a nuncio. I began that in rather tragic circumstances because my predecessor, Archbishop Michael Courtney, had been assassinated. And in December of 2003, I was already nominated to succeed him, and he was going to be the nuncio in Cuba. But in the what should have been the last weeks of his mission, the car in which he was traveling back to Bujumbura, the capital of Burundi, was attacked, and he was wounded and died a few hours later.
And was it also in Burundi where the nunciature was bombed or something?
Yes, it was bombed on one occasion. I was actually on vacation when it was bombed, but my secretary was there and had to experience all that. So it was probably mistakenly bombed. There was a meeting of ministers of defense in Bujumbura, somewhat down the hill from where the nunciature was. And we think that they were the rebel forces were trying to bomb that. And the bomb fell short and hit the nunciature.
Guatemala, was it a more peaceful experience?
Well, I think that was the intention of my superiors, that it would be a more secure and peaceful. But it wasn't really, because it was extremely insecure. And even today, I think it still is. Guatemala is a beautiful country, but has very, very deep social problems. It had what they call a conflict, internal conflict, for about 30 years, when the army was in conflict with people and was committing some rather terrible atrocities against people, in which many people of the church were involved, including many catechists. So it was a rather insecure country, a lot of violence, many murders. In fact, it was much more insecure than Burundi had been during the Civil War, because drug cartels and people like that, there are no rules. In war, strangely enough, there are rules. You know where not to go to and what to do. Whereas when you've got organized crime, you don't know what the rules are, and there are no rules.
You witnessed it yourself.
Yes, yes. Sadly, one did. There was a lot of violence on the streets of the capital city, and in other parts of the country. So you saw there's some pretty gruesome things.
After Guatemala, you were appointed nuncio to Australia.
Yes.
And was it more relaxed in Australia?
Australia was much more relaxed. Unfortunately, I was only there for 2 years, so I was just beginning to feel at home, getting into the job, learning about the country and the church, when it was decided that I should go back to Rome and do the job which I've been in now for the last 10 years.
Yes. For those who are not very much familiar with the role of the Vatican as a government, how does it work, Archbishop? Because so here, of course, we understand the role of the nuncio and the role of our cardinals and our archbishops, but we're not very much acquainted with how the Vatican has relations with states. Could you enlighten us on that?
Well, the Vatican is recognized as internationally for many well, not so much the Vatican of centuries. It's really the Holy See that has been recognized for many centuries. And the Vatican city-state exists from 1929, when the Roman question was resolved with the Italian state. And the Pope governs the Universal Church with the aid of the Roman Curia, which are the offices of government, each one having a particular competence, a particular job to do. And I work within the Secretariat of State or the Papal Secretariat, and we try to assist the Pope in whatever his needs are. And the section I work in is concerned with diplomacy and with politics. From 1870 onwards, the Pope was a prisoner in the Vatican and couldn't go out because the Roman question, wasn't resolved. It was only that they came to an agreement between Pope Pius XI and between the kingdom, as it was then, of Italy, and in particular with the Duce Benito Mussolini. And that resolved the matter. And then the Pope, there was a harmonious resolution of the conflict, and the relationship between the Italian state, now the Republic of Italy, and the Holy See has been very positive and very serene ever since then.
We always hear Pope Francis asking the world to pray for peace, and he is really a Pope for peace. But we have also, for example, I was very interested though in his message for World Day of Peace last January 1, wherein of all the topics, he talked about artificial intelligence.
Yes.
It's a unique approach to peace, but maybe we could just, if you could enlighten us on how he segued artificial intelligence or technology as a means to peace.
Well, the Pope is very concerned, as are nearly everybody in the world is concerned about artificial intelligence now. And he sees it possessing great potential. Undoubtedly, the technologies that we're even using in this interview can be very much to the benefit of humanity. But also, there is a darker potential. I think it could be used in war. Artificial intelligence could be used in weapons. And this is something that the Pope is very concerned about, that decisions in conflicts have to remain to be made by us, by the human beings, in accordance with conscience, in accordance with what we believe to be right and to be true, and not handed over to machines who are perhaps programmed or using their algorithms to resolve problems. This would be irresponsible use of technology.
Let's go around the world, Archbishop. It seems that you are right now, aside from Pope Francis, the #1 advocate for peace. Of course, we are all following what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, and you were quoted as saying that the Pope is obstinate for peace. Could you expound on that?
Well, the Pope is very much convinced that these wars, these conflicts that we have in the world today, will ultimately only be resolved by dialogue, by negotiation. And so he tries to encourage the leaders involved to move in that direction. We understand difficulties and positions that people have adopted, but ultimately the Pope is in a very privileged position because, as I said many times, the Holy See, the Holy Father himself, does not have interests like other people do. The Holy See doesn't have a national interest. We are not concerned about the, shall we say, economic situation of the Vatican, that in a way that a prime minister or a president in a country who's elected by the people has to be concerned with the well-being of the people in those terms. He has to look after the security of the country, the prosperity of the country. And if you don't do that, you don't get re-elected, or you get pushed out of office. Now, the Pope isn't a servant of such interests, and therefore he can, in a very impartial way, he can advocate for peace in a way that perhaps others can't.
It was a very unique proposal, though, that was at least quoted by the press, saying that Ukraine should wave the white flag. Was that? I understand it from a personal Catholic perspective because I grew up in a family where my mother was saying, sometimes you have to forgive and allow yourself to be shortchanged in the interest or for the sake of peace in the family. I don't know if that is the same approach on a global governance level that the Pope has taken on this, but it sparked a bit of controversy.
It did. It did. Well, the Pope was not trying to advocate that Ukraine or President Zelensky should surrender. What he was saying is that as the white flag has been used in the past, that we should seek the protection of the white flag in order to move towards negotiations, in order to enter into dialogue with the other party. And the Pope remains convinced of that. But it was open to misunderstanding. What the Pope were looking for, obviously, is a durable peace, is a peace that is just and which respects the rights of the Ukrainian people who have been attacked.
And of course, another area of the world that everyone is looking at right now is the Israel-Hamas war. And I realized, Archbishop, that in 2015, one of your first achievements was the comprehensive agreement that was signed. Could you tell us about that and how this agreement was really a document that was hoping to pave the way for long-term peace?
This was the agreement with Palestine.
Yes.
Yes. Well, obviously that agreement was the result of the fruit of many, many years of negotiation by my predecessors and by the many people who've worked in the Secretariat of State. I was just happened that it came to completion at the time when I was in this office, and so it was my privilege and honor to be able to sign on behalf of the Holy See. Yes, it was. We still, the Holy See remains convinced that peace between Israel and the Palestinians will come about by what people call the two-state solution. Now, the two-state solution has, in recent decades, been pretty well dismissed by a lot of people as unworkable. But now, tragically, in the conflict in Gaza, people have begun to talk about it again, begin to look at it again, and see that this really does seem the only just way to bring about lasting peace between Israel and the Palestinians, between Israel and Palestine. Now, there's still a lot of work to be done on that. It's going to need a lot of statesmanship. It's possibly going to need a great deal of ingenuity to find a way to make a two-state solution work. But considering the suffering, the tragedies that we've witnessed in recent months, then we have to make that effort. The world has to make that effort. And the world has to help Israel and Palestine.
Is a two-state solution, it's a proposal, but is it actually possible?
We believe it's possible, yes. At the moment, it is a proposal. At the moment, it remains possibly even a bit of a dream. But we have to make that a reality.
Archbishop, we've tackled Ukraine and Israel. Of course, we're in Asia. Is there any statement from the Vatican on the conflict in the West Philippine Sea, or is it premature? And are there specific concerns for the Asian region?
Well, obviously, the world is in a state of, I might say, sort of disorder as a result of the conflicts that are existing, principally Ukraine, Middle East, but other parts of the world, obviously, as well. There is a new world order being negotiated, and that hopefully will be built on the firm foundations of justice and respect for people, on international law, and of a willingness to cooperate, to build a family of nations. And that can be the family of nations here in the Far East. And so the Holy See's attitude to where there are difficulties and tensions, that people should dialogue and they should try to find peaceful solutions based on international law.
When you lived here, Archbishop, were you by any chance able to visit Mindanao?
I did go there once, actually, more or less to the place where we're going back today, because I went with the then nuncio, Archbishop Moreni. We went to the episcopal ordination of the Bishop of Malay Balay. So we did go to there. But,
I mentioned Mindanao because we were talking about peace, and I had the privilege of going with Archbishop Brown to Jolo for a celebration of peace. It was the anniversary of the bishop at the time who was killed during the time of war, and we were able to see the fruits of peace, and it was so beautiful. And it really was dialogue that paved the way.
I think you're talking about Bishop Benjamin de Jesus.
Yes.
Now, I was here in the nunciature when he was made the apostolic vicar of Jolo, and because he was ordained by the Pope in Rome, and then he came back to the Philippines, and I met him here, and I met him on several occasions. Yes, he had done a lot to sow peace. He was, above all, I think, a man who had peace in his heart, and so it was a bit contagious. It was tragic that he had to make that sacrifice of his life. But I think, as you say yourself, the fruit is there to be seen.
It's so beautiful now, Archbishop. I'm happy to share that what I witnessed was it was really a community of different religions all coming together, and you could really feel the joy after all of the suffering that they had experienced throughout the years, and the experiences that they were sharing. A priest was sharing that there was one time that he was blessing just heads. But today they live together in peace, and it's really so beautiful. I hope that someday you'll be able to also visit them. It's quite far. I saw that you had given a beautiful talk on the culture of encounter. Could you expound on this, and how is it helping us in our relations with states?
Well, the culture of encounter is one of the expressions the Holy Father has used throughout the pontificate. The idea is that people very often shy away from each other. They don't want to talk to each other. They don't want to know about each other. The Pope is encouraging people to talk, to meet, and to get to know each other, to break down the barriers which exist between peoples, and to really realize that we have often very much in common. After all, we're all human beings. We all have the same needs, the same aspirations, and after all, we're all trying to build a decent world, a world in which will be fit for the children who are born today and future generations. So the Pope's trying to say to people, we cannot resolve our problems, our differences, by running away from each other. We have to come together. And that's what he's talking about in the culture of encounter.
You also mentioned the role of charity and justice as a path to peace, as part of the culture of encounter.
Well, I think, as we all know, you can't have true peace without justice. And where there are atrocities, where there is conflict, then people can only be reconciled to each other if they're confident that also there is justice. You can have, indeed, you need mercy, you need forgiveness, but you also need justice if you're going to build a strong, reconciled society.
Thank you, Archbishop. And as a final question, Pope Francis always asks us to pray for peace, and he actually gave a statement saying that at this time, the world is at war. Although ordinary citizens in cities and in countries that enjoy the benefit of peace, some of us don't really feel the effects of war that much. What can we do in our own little way to help propel the mission for peace?
Well, I think you're referring to when the Pope, quite early on in the pontificate, spoke of the Third World War piecemeal. And I was, as I've said before, I was quite shocked by that expression. Because World War, for those of us who know our 20th century history, represents terrible conflicts which took millions and millions of human lives. And we know what happened here in the Philippines also in the Second World War. But I've come to understand what the Pope was getting at, that yes, there are too many conflicts, and there is a danger that these conflicts, which are separated to some extent, can infect the whole of global society. So I think what we've got to do is we've got to be aware of the fragility and the preciousness of peace. And we all have a part to play. In reality, we're all suffering to some extent the consequences of global instability, of the wars that already exist, because it's affecting the cost of living, it's affecting supply chains in production, and all of these things which affect parts of the world which may be thousands of miles away from where the war is, but we are being affected. Even as we know, the distribution of grain from the Ukraine, which was
inflation.
So we all have a part to play, and to protect the peace which we have. We all have to be peacemakers. We all have to be people of the Beatitudes. This is what we're called to be.
Thank you, Archbishop. And would you just like to share a message to our audiences? This will be on the different pages of the different churches also in the Philippines.
Well, I would just like to say that it is a real joy to be here, and it's a joy to come in the name of the Holy See and of the Holy Father, and to assure the Filipino people and the Catholic Church here in the Philippines of the Holy Father's blessing and love. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Archbishop. So I'm Margaux Salcedo from Dominus Est. Thank you for joining us today.